You don't belong here. People like you don't have millions in the bank. Stop wasting our time or leave right now." Those words didn't come from an angry customer. They came from the very people hired to serve. Imagine standing in a lobby of marble floors, surrounded by cameras, tellers, managers, and customers, and being told you don't belong in a place that exists to protect your money. Before I take you inside this story, hit like if this story moves you, and subscribe to hear how this 5-minute banking reckoning unfolds. Now let's step inside Liberty First Bank on Wall Street, New York. The morning was routine for most, lines forming in front of teller windows, a few customers clutching briefcases, some scrolling on their phones. Nothing seemed unusual until a man in his late 40s stepped through the revolving glass door. He wore a plain white t-shirt, faded jeans, and sneakers that had clearly walked many miles. In his hand, he carried only a slim leather wallet. His name was Anthony Carter, but no one in that room knew it yet. To them, he looked like a man with little to his name. They did not know he was the chief executive officer of Carter Financial Holdings, worth nearly $19 billion. A man who controlled 40% of Liberty First Bank itself. Anthony believed in seeing the truth with his own eyes. Over the past months, his office had received dozens of anonymous complaints about the Wall Street branch. Minority customers said they were stalled, questioned harshly, even accused of fraud without cause. Some said managers buried their complaints, shredding them before they ever reached headquarters. Anthony could have sent investigators. He could have sent auditors. But he had learned long ago that reports could be polished and truths could be hidden. He wanted to see it himself, and he wanted to feel exactly what customers felt. That is why he walked in without a suit, without a driver, without bodyguards, just a man, just a customer, testing the system he had promised to build on fairness. As he stepped into line, a few glances turned his way. A guard at the side door tilted his head, studying Anthony's clothes with suspicion. A teller whispered something to her coworker, and both laughed under their breath. Anthony heard it but kept his face calm. He had learned patience, though inside. Memories stirred, memories of being 25, walking into a small bank in Detroit to withdraw money for his first property investment, and being told, "Come back with a lawyer. We don't trust your paperwork." Memories of being 15, clutching a savings bond his grandmother gave him, only to be asked whether he had stolen it. Those scars never left, and today, decades later, he was testing whether the culture had truly changed. When it was finally his turn at the counter, Daniel Brooks leaned forward. Daniel had been with the branch for years, a man in his mid-30s, known for his sharp tongue and arrogance. He looked Anthony up and down and smirked. "State your business," he said flatly, his tone more command than question. Anthony spoke evenly. "I need to make a withdrawal," he said, sliding his card across the counter. $2 million to be wired into a private investment account. The room grew noticeably quieter. A few customers in line shifted. Hearing the number, $2 million. Daniel's eyebrows shot up, then lowered into a mocking grin. $2 million. From you. Dressed like that? He scoffed. "Sir, we've had scammers come in off the street pretending the same thing. You'll need to prove you're not wasting my time." Anthony didn't raise his voice, didn't flinch. "My ID is valid. My account is valid," he replied. But Daniel didn't even check the screen. "Yeah. Well, people with that kind of money don't look like you. You'll need to provide proof of funds or change your story." Laughter bubbled from the back of the line. A cruel, knowing laugh. At that moment, Lisa Hernandez, a younger teller, stepped over, without even glancing at the system. She snatched Anthony's card and slid it into her drawer, locking it with a click. "This card looks fake," she declared loudly. "Honestly, you probably stole it. You need to leave before we call security." Gasps rippled across the lobby. One older woman near the plant by the window whispered, "Did she really just say that?" Another man muttered, "This isn't right." And from the side, a phone lifted. Olivia Reed, a 31-year-old attorney waiting for her appointment, hit record. Her voice rang out. "This is racism at Liberty First Bank, and I'm putting it online." Anthony stood motionless, his jaw relaxed, his eyes steady. But inside, something had begun to burn. Not anger without control, but a flame he had kept banked for years, waiting for the right moment. Daniel leaned across again. "Final warning, sir. Leave now, or we escalate this. This is not your place." Anthony slowly turned his head toward him, then toward Lisa, then toward the drawer holding his card. His voice came low, steady. "You are not just disrespecting me, you are destroying what this bank stands for." Lisa rolled her eyes. "Don't preach. Just leave." Anthony knew then that the test was over. In less than 5 minutes, they had revealed exactly what he came to uncover. They had shown their contempt openly, before customers, before cameras, and soon, before the world. He inhaled slowly, his hands loose at his side. He had not come here looking for a fight, but a fight had found him anyway, and in only minutes more, everything in that branch, every position of power, every smug smirk and dismissive word, would collapse. "Are you deaf or just stubborn? I told you to leave. Men like you walk in here with fake cards and fake stories. We don't serve your kind." Daniel Brooks spat the words across the counter, his voice loud enough to echo through the marble lobby. Customers turned their heads, some uncomfortable, some entertained, but no one spoke up yet. Anthony Carter stood still, breathing slow, hands relaxed, eyes fixed on Daniel as if measuring him. He had faced worse words in his youth, but never in a bank that he partly owned, never while holding a card that could open vaults most people never saw. Lisa Hernandez leaned on the drawer where she had locked his card, her tone dripping with disdain. "And don't bother asking again. This is staying right here. You're lucky we don't call the police already." A few chuckles rose from the line. One man whispered, "I knew he didn't look right." Anthony's jaw clenched just slightly, but his voice remained calm. "That is my card. That is my account, and you are violating every rule of service you swore to follow." Lisa smirked. "You think quoting rules will save you. Rules don't apply when people look suspicious." Her words cut like knives, not only to Anthony but to others listening who knew exactly what she meant. And then, from behind the counter, a softer voice broke through. "That's not correct. He has every right to access his account." All eyes turned. It was Maya Torres, 26 years old, a teller still in her probationary period, her dark hair pulled back neatly, her hands trembling just slightly as she stepped closer. Victoria Langston, the branch manager, emerged from her glass office, her heels clicking sharply against the tile. Her face was sharp, her eyes cold. "Maya, get back to your station, now!" Maya swallowed but did not move. "He hasn't been given a fair process," she said, her voice steadier. "You can't just take a card and accuse him without looking at the system." Victoria's tone rose, cutting through the room. "You will do as you're told, or you will be out of a job by noon." The threat hung heavy in the air, and for a moment Maya hesitated, her chest rising quickly, but then she squared her shoulders. "With respect, ma'am, this is wrong." The crowd stirred. A woman in a blue dress near the door muttered, "She's right. This isn't how you treat people." Another man near the line folded his arms, frowning at the staff. Daniel's face reddened. "Don't listen to this rookie," he barked. "I've seen this type before. They walk in with big claims, hoping we'll fall for it." Anthony turned his head slowly, his eyes meeting Daniel's. His voice, low but clear, carried across the lobby. What type is that exactly? Daniel froze for a fraction of a second, then sneered. You know what I mean. The type that never belongs here. Gasps whispered through the room. Phones began to lift higher. Olivia Reed, the young attorney, stepped forward slightly, her camera capturing every detail. Keep talking, she said firmly, her voice loud enough for the live stream to pick it up. Let the world hear exactly how you treat your own clients. Victoria snapped her head toward her voice cold. Ma'am, put your phone away. Filming inside the bank is prohibited. Olivia did not lower it. So is discrimination. Ethan Wallace, the journalist standing nearby, raised his phone as well. We're live right now, and people are watching, he announced. Victoria's eyes flashed with panic for a moment, but she masked it quickly. Security, she barked, though there was no dedicated guard on the floor, only a single doorman now looking uneasy. Daniel stepped around the counter, his jaw tight, his fists balled. He grabbed Anthony by the elbow, his grip rough. Let's not make this harder. Time to go. The sound of contact broke the fragile line of patience. Customers gasped. One woman shouted, "You can't put hands on him!" Another man lifted his phone higher, recording every second. Anthony's body shifted back slightly with the force, but his voice did not waver. Let go of me. Now. The tone was calm, but it thundered through the air, shaking even Daniel for a moment. Maya rushed forward, planting herself between Daniel and Anthony, her arms slightly outstretched. Stop it! You can't touch him, she cried, her voice cracking but strong. His account is valid, and you haven't even checked the system. Daniel's face twisted in anger. Being challenged by a junior teller was an insult he couldn't tolerate. Stay out of this. You don't know what you're doing. Maya's eyes flashed. I know exactly what I'm doing. I'm following the rules you're breaking. The room was electric now, every word fueling the storm. Olivia's voice rang out. This is racism at Liberty First Bank, and it's happening right now in front of us all. Ethan's live stream captured murmurs of agreement, voices overlapping. This is outrageous, someone said. This happened to me last year, said another. Anthony looked around, seeing not just hostility, but a growing wave of support. He spoke, not to Daniel or Lisa, but to the entire lobby. You think you're humiliating me, he said softly, but what you are really doing is exposing yourselves. Victoria's patience snapped. Enough, she shouted, her voice sharp as glass. This man is a fraud, and anyone who sides with him will regret it. She glared at Maya, her words like poison. You have a future here. Don't throw it away for a stranger. Maya's lips trembled, but she lifted her chin. If standing up for what's right costs me my job, then so be it. The crowd murmured louder now, some clapping lightly, others nodding. Lisa slammed her hand against the locked drawer. We are done here. Call the police. Anthony's gaze shifted to her, steady, unblinking. You have already crossed the line, and soon the only police you will see are the ones asking why you broke the law. Lisa's smirk faltered. Just for a second. The atmosphere grew heavier with every breath. Customers pressing closer, phones raised high. Daniel still held Anthony's elbow, but his grip loosened under the weight of the stairs. Maya stood firm. Olivia filmed. Ethan narrated. And the tide began to turn. In that moment, humiliation shifted from the man in the white shirt to the very people who had tried to strip him of dignity. And though none of them knew it yet, in only a few minutes, the branch itself would be shaken to its core. The lobby had become a stage, the tension thick enough to choke. Customers whispering, phones raised, staff red-faced, yet Anthony Carter stood calm in the middle of it all, silent but unyielding. When Maya Torres, the probationary teller, did something no one expected. She stepped forward, her hands trembling slightly as she reached for her terminal, her voice firm but shaking at the edges. I'm pulling up his account, she said. breaking every unwritten rule of silence in front of her manager. Victoria Langston snapped her head toward her, fury flashing in her eyes. "Don't you dare! Step away from that screen!" But Maya's fingers were already moving, and the monitor flickered to life. Rows of numbers filling the air with an unspoken weight. She turned the screen just enough that customers behind the counter could glimpse it, and her voice rang out. Louder now. Executive Platinum account. Holder Anthony Carter. Balance $2,300,000. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by a gasp from the back of the line. Olivia Reed whispered into her phone. "It's real. It's right here. I'm looking at it." And Ethan Wallace spoke directly into his live stream. "They're lying. He's not a fraud. He's one of their top clients." Anthony did not move. He did not gloat. He simply looked at the locked drawer where Lisa had hidden his card, and then at Victoria, whose face had gone pale beneath her mask of arrogance. But Daniel Brooks wasn't finished, his pride too wounded to retreat. He shoved Anthony harder toward the door, his voice cracking with anger. "I don't care what that screen says. People like him don't have that kind of money. This is some trick, some setup." And that shove sent ripples through the crowd. A woman cried out, "Stop touching him!" A man stepped forward, placing himself between Daniel and Anthony, his arms crossed like a shield. "No one is dragging this man out of here," he declared, and customers nodded, murmurs of agreement rising into a steady hum of support. Maya planted her feet, her voice firmer now, emboldened by the truth on the screen. "The account is verified. You cannot deny it. You cannot call him a fraud when the system says otherwise." Lisa's face drained of color. Her lips parted as if to speak, but no words came. And the crowd pressed closer, phones recording every angle, Olivia speaking directly to her camera. "For everyone watching, this is not just one mistake. This is discrimination caught live. Look at how far they're willing to go, even with proof in front of them." Victoria tried to reclaim control, her voice sharp. "All of you, put your phones away. This is private banking business." But no one moved. Instead, someone shouted, "Private until you humiliate him in public." And the line between customers and staff had now split into two sides. Anthony finally spoke, his voice low, calm but weighted with authority. "You said I didn't belong. You said I was a fraud. Now you see the truth. And yet you still push me toward the door. This isn't about me anymore. This is about what you've chosen to become." His words rolled across the lobby, and heads nodded. A woman near the door whispered, "This is exactly what happened to my brother last year." Another man muttered, "I pulled my account after they stalled me for days." And slowly the pattern became clear to everyone listening. This wasn't an isolated incident. It was a habit, a culture. Daniel's face twisted with desperation, his grip loosening but his pride holding him still. "Don't listen to them," he barked. "This man is trying to scam us all." But Ethan's voice cut through like a knife. "No. The only scam here is the one being run by this branch. The evidence is on the screen, the treatment is on camera, and the world is watching," Victoria hissed. "You think anyone cares about a few videos? This will blow over." But Olivia shook her head. "Not this time. Not with this man. Not with this account." Maya took another step forward, pointing at the screen, her voice unwavering now. "He is not just a client. He is one of the highest-tier accounts in this bank. And you locked his card away like it was stolen. You broke protocol, and you broke the trust of every customer standing here." The lobby erupted with voices, some angry, some stunned, all directed at the staff. One elderly woman clutched her purse tighter and said aloud, "If they can do this to him, they can do it to any of us." And the realization spread like fire through the room. Anthony breathed slowly, his eyes scanning the crowd, seeing allies forming where moments before there had only been silence. He did not need to raise his voice. The truth was doing it for him. But inside he knew. This was only the beginning. Because revealing his account was one thing. Revealing who he really was would shatter everything. And for now, he let the storm build, each second adding pressure, each word of the staff digging them deeper into their own downfall. Victoria slammed her palm against the counter, desperate to restore order. "This is my branch. I run this floor, and I will not be undermined," she shouted. But her voice rang hollow, drowned out by murmurs of disapproval. Maya looked at her squarely, no longer afraid. "No, you don't run this branch. Integrity does. And you just lost it." The weight of that sentence hung in the air. Customers nodding, cameras rolling, and Daniel stepping back slightly, his bravado crumbling under the force of a truth he could no longer bury. Anthony adjusted his stance, his shoulders straightening, his presence filling the space, not by shouting, not by force, but by simple, undeniable authority. And in that moment, even without revealing his title, the room began to sense that he was more than he appeared. More than just another customer humiliated at a counter. He was someone who carried power, and the countdown to reckoning had already begun. Daniel Brooks's temper finally snapped, his face red, his voice harsh, and before anyone could stop him, he shoved Anthony Carter in the chest, harder this time, the sound of the impact echoing through the lobby, and the gasp that followed came from nearly every throat in the room. A collective intake of breath, as if the entire building had felt the blow. Anthony stumbled back one step, steadying himself, his eyes narrowing but his voice still calm. "That was your last mistake," he said, and though he spoke softly, it carried like thunder. Maya Torres darted forward again, planting herself between Daniel and Anthony, her arms stretched wide, her voice breaking but brave. "Don't touch him. You have no right. He is a client, and he deserves respect." Her defiance hung in the air, shaking the brittle authority that Victoria Langston had tried to cling to. Victoria stormed forward, pointing a sharp finger at Maya. "Step aside. You are humiliating this branch." But Maya did not move. "No," she said, her voice firm. "You are humiliating this bank by letting this happen." The crowd erupted with noise, customers stepping closer, the line no longer waiting quietly, but pressing together in solidarity. A man in a gray suit crossed his arms and stood shoulder to shoulder with Anthony. "If he leaves, we all leave," he said loudly, his words drawing nods and murmurs of agreement. A woman in heels stepped out of line, holding her phone high. "Everything is recorded. You can't hide this." Olivia Reed turned her camera directly on Daniel. "The world is watching you assault a customer in broad daylight," she declared, while Ethan Wallace's voice shook with righteous anger as he narrated into his stream. "This is no longer a banking transaction. This is injustice playing out in real time." Lisa Hernandez fumbled with the locked drawer that held Anthony's card, her hands shaking as customers stared at her. "This card is suspicious," she repeated weakly. But no one believed her anymore. One elderly man spoke up. "Suspicious is how you treat people you think don't belong." His voice cracked with memory. "They froze my account last year without cause." And another customer near him nodded fiercely. "My brother was made to wait an hour while others walked right past him. It's a pattern." The lobby had become a courtroom. Every bystander a witness, every camera a record of guilt. And Anthony stood in the center, not as a victim, but as a man holding steady against a storm. Daniel tried once more, grabbing Anthony's arm. But this time, 5 customers surged forward, forming a line of protection. One man shoved Daniel's hand away. "Not again! You don't touch him again!" he barked. The energy had shifted completely, and the staff's authority cracked like glass underfoot. Victoria shouted for order. "Everyone calm down! You are disrupting operations!" But her words rang hollow, drowned by the voices of ordinary people who had seen enough. "You are the disruption!" one woman shouted. "You are the ones out of order!" Anthony raised his hand slightly, his gesture enough to calm the noise, his voice even. Grave. I came to withdraw my own money. You accused me of theft. You took my card. You put hands on me. And now you claim I don't belong here. This will not go unanswered. The words hung heavy, and even those who had doubted him now looked at him with respect, sensing the quiet authority behind his tone. Maya's eyes glistened with tears, but her chin was lifted high. He is right, and if this costs me my job, I can live with that. But I won't stand by while this continues. Victoria hissed at her, her voice low and venomous. You've just ended your career. But Maya shook her head. No, you ended yours when you chose prejudice over policy. And the line of customers applauded softly. Not a cheer, but a steady rhythm of approval. The kind of sound that told everyone in that branch that the tide had turned. Olivia spoke into her phone again, her voice trembling with passion. For those watching, this is not just a story about one man. It's about a culture, about who is allowed to be seen as worthy and who is not. And today we are watching that culture collapse. Anthony took a slow step forward, past Maya, his posture tall, his presence commanding. You had every chance to de-escalate, every chance to treat me as a customer, every chance to honor the oath of fairness that banking requires. And instead you mocked me. You locked my card, you put hands on me, and you broadcast your contempt for everyone to see. You thought I was powerless, but you will see how wrong you were. His words were not shouted, yet they carried such weight that even Daniel lowered his gaze for a moment, and Lisa's fingers froze on the drawer key. Ethan's voice broke through again. Thousands are watching. This is trending now. And the crowd gasped softly, realizing the story had already escaped the walls of the bank. Victoria's face drained of color, but she fought to recover. You are impersonating someone else. This is a setup, she stammered, her tone shrill, but the excuse sounded empty, and Olivia shook her head. The only impersonation here is the mask of professionalism you wear while practicing discrimination. In that charged moment, Anthony's phone buzzed quietly in his pocket. He did not answer it yet, but he knew who it was. His assistant, Lena, monitoring the internal system, ready to act. His eyes swept the room, taking in Maya's bravery, the customers' solidarity, the staff's unraveling, and he knew the reckoning was minutes away. He looked once more at Victoria, then at Daniel, then at Lisa, and said calmly, You believe you run this branch, but soon you will learn who truly holds the keys. The lobby fell silent again. The silence before the hammer drops, before truth explodes into revelation, and though none of them knew it yet, the next words spoken in that branch would end careers, destroy reputations, and set into motion a transformation far larger than any of them imagined. The noise in the lobby swelled until Anthony Carter slowly reached into his pocket, pulled out his phone, and dialed a number. The crowd leaned in, sensing that something was about to happen. His voice stayed calm, steady, measured. Lena, activate emergency protocol section 11B. And the room seemed to pause as he spoke, because though no one knew exactly what that meant, the authority in his tone left no doubt that it was serious. Within seconds, the monitors at every teller station flickered, screens going black, access denied flashing in red across each one. Lisa Hernandez pressed her keyboard frantically, but nothing responded. Daniel Brooks spun back toward his counter, panic dawning in his eyes. What's happening? He muttered, but Anthony already knew. Lena's voice came through the speaker of his phone, clear and professional. Branch access terminated, systems locked, staff logins disabled, awaiting your instruction. Gasps filled the lobby as employees realized their power had been stripped away in an instant. Victoria Langston stumbled forward, her face pale. What have you done? You can't override us from here, she barked. But Anthony's eyes locked onto hers, calm, unblinking. You think you run this branch, but you've never held the keys. I do." The words hit like a verdict, sending murmurs rippling through the crowd, customers recording with wide eyes, some whispering. "He's not just a client. He's someone bigger." Daniel tried to save face, raising his voice. "This is illegal. He's bluffing. He's not who he says he is." But Olivia Reed turned her phone squarely on him, her voice sharp. "The only bluff here is you pretending you know the rules while you assault paying customers. The truth is already out," Ethan Wallace added, "and thousands are watching live. The story has already broken outside these walls." Victoria's chest rose and fell rapidly, her hands clenched. "You don't have authority here," she repeated desperately. But then Anthony tilted his phone toward the room, another voice joining the call, firm and unmistakable. "This is David Ellison, board member of Liberty First Bank. Mr. Carter has full executive authority. His orders are binding. Every action taken today is supported by the board." The crowd gasped again, customers whispering, "Carter, Carter, is that really him?" Maya's eyes widened, her breath catching as the pieces came together. She whispered softly, You're Anthony Carter." And the silence that followed was like a hammer strike. Every employee realizing the man they had mocked, shoved, and accused of theft was not just a wealthy customer, but the man who owned 40% of the very institution they worked for. Anthony's shoulders straightened, his presence filling the lobby. But he did not gloat. He did not smile. He simply looked at the people who had humiliated him. "Victoria Langston, Daniel Brooks, Lisa Hernandez," he said clearly, his voice carrying across the entire room. "Effective immediately. You are terminated under CEO Emergency Authority. Your access has been revoked. Your positions dissolved. Security will escort you out." Lena's voice came through again. "Confirmed. Their digital credentials have been disabled. HR notified. Regional compliance alerted." Victoria lunged toward her desk, her monitor already black. The system logged her out permanently. "You can't do this. There has to be process. There has to be review," she cried, her voice shrill. But Anthony's tone was steady, unyielding. "You created your own process when you profiled me, when you mocked me, when you put your hands on me. You conducted the investigation with every word you spoke, and you delivered the verdict with every action you took. Today is only the sentence." Daniel staggered back against the counter, his face drained of color. Customers filming every second. One man shouted, "That's justice." Another woman clapped softly. Olivia's voice rang out into her camera. "We are witnessing the firing of an entire branch staff in real time, and it's happening because discrimination finally met its reckoning." Lisa's hands shook as she unlocked the drawer and slid Anthony's card onto the counter with trembling fingers. She whispered, I didn't know who you were." But Anthony's eyes cut to hers, his words quiet but piercing. "That's always the excuse. You didn't know, but you never cared to know. Not who I was, not who any customer was, because what you saw first was my skin, my clothes, my appearance, and that was enough for you to pass judgment. Ignorance is not innocence. And today, ignorance cost you your career." The crowd erupted in murmurs, some filming, some shaking their heads in disbelief. Maya stood frozen for a moment, tears threatening, not from fear but from vindication. Anthony turned to her, his tone softening. "Maya Torres, you stood when it mattered. You put principle before position, and courage before comfort. Effective immediately, you are promoted. Corporate will be in touch to discuss your role leading customer integrity initiatives." Maya's lips parted in shock, her hand rising to cover her mouth. "Sir, I didn't do it for recognition," she whispered, her voice breaking. Anthony gave a small nod. "That is exactly why you deserve it." The customers applauded this time, a real applause, steady and heartfelt, the sound of ordinary people affirming that justice had found its place in a lobby where dignity had been stolen only moments before. Victoria tried one last time, her voice trembling with rage. "This is a disaster! You'll lose staff, you'll lose clients, you'll lose control!" But Anthony faced her squarely, his tone cold. "I'd rather lose staff than lose the soul of this bank. I'd rather lose numbers than lose integrity. And I'd rather lose your services than lose the trust of a single customer." The line hit like a gavel strike, customers murmuring approval. One man near the back called out, "That's leadership." And Maya whispered through tears, "That's what this place always needed." Anthony slipped his card back into his wallet, not with triumph, but with calm finality. He looked around the room at the cameras, the customers, the stunned staff, and said, "5 minutes ago you tried to push me out. Today I push you out instead. And let this be the beginning of a new foundation, not built on arrogance and bias, but on fairness and accountability." The crowd clapped again. Olivia ended her recording with a firm voice. "For everyone watching, this was not just a firing, it was a reckoning. And it started with one man in a white shirt refusing to leave. The very moment Anthony Carter ended the call and confirmed the firings. The energy inside the branch shifted from shock to inevitability. The staff who had mocked him were no longer employees. They were simply people standing in a lobby that no longer belonged to them. Victoria Langston stood frozen, her access badge already disabled, the phone at her desk ringing unanswered, the system recognizing her as a former manager before she could even process what had happened. Daniel Brooks dropped his eyes to the floor, his bravado shattered, the cameras catching his slump as he realized the world had seen him put hands on his own CEO. And Lisa Hernandez stood pale and silent, her drawer open, her hands trembling, knowing her career in banking had ended with a single arrogant decision. The silence between them was heavier than any words, because the customers knew and the customers had judged. Outside the walls of the branch, the story was already traveling. Olivia Reed's video had passed 80,000 views in a day. Ethan Wallace's live commentary had been clipped and shared on several financial blogs. Not a viral wildfire, but a steady burn. Enough to reach regulators, enough to draw headlines in the New York Post and the Wall Street Journal. CEO confronts bias at own bank, read one. Humiliation on Wall Street, read another. And while the numbers were modest compared to global scandals, they were more than enough to force accountability. Within 48 hours, Liberty First Bank's regional office confirmed the firings. A press release stated that the actions at the Wall Street branch violated corporate policy and would not be tolerated. But behind the scenes, the consequences were deeper. Victoria's name was flagged by the New York State Banking Commission. An inquiry opened into her record, uncovering at least 27 complaints that had been buried. Complaints from minority clients who were stalled, ignored, or denied without review. Evidence of a culture of bias carefully hidden until now. And when the investigation became public, Victoria's fall was swift, her pension frozen, her professional license under review, and whispers spread that federal charges for suppression of discrimination complaints might follow. She went from branch manager in the heart of Wall Street to a cautionary headline in less than a week. Daniel Brooks faced his own reckoning, his face plastered on blogs and consumer advocacy sites. The clip of him shoving Anthony replayed again and again, not millions of times but thousands, enough to make his name a liability. His job applications quietly declined. No bank in New York willing to hire a man known for arrogance and assault. He applied for smaller financial firms, but the answer was always the same. "We've seen the video. We can't take the risk." And so the man who once barked orders behind a counter found himself working temporary shifts as a clerk in a payday loan shop on the edge of Queens. His reputation forever scarred. Lisa Hernandez fared no better. Her name blacklisted across the industry. The National Banking Association marking her file with an internal note. "Do not rehire. She claimed she had simply followed orders. But the footage told another story. The sneer in her voice, the disdain in her words, and no institution wanted to invite that stain. Her career ended not with a resignation, but with a silent door closing everywhere she turned. For the customers who had stood in that lobby. The story lingered. Some returned weeks later to find new faces at the counters, polite greetings replacing cold stares. A plaque hung near the entrance reading, "Integrity begins at the front line." And those who had witnessed the humiliation felt a quiet pride that their voices had mattered. One elderly woman told her family, "I saw justice in real time. I saw a man stand tall when others tried to shove him down." For Maya Torres, the young teller who had defied her manager. Her life changed completely. Anthony's promise of promotion was not just symbolic. Within days, corporate called her into a meeting, offering her the position of team lead for customer integrity at the very branch where she had once been silenced. She accepted with tears in her eyes, humbled but resolute, and co-workers whispered that she had become the symbol of courage inside the company. Proof that one voice could matter even against a wall of authority. Anthony Carter himself refused television interviews. He ignored requests for morning talk shows. He gave no speeches to cameras. Instead, he focused on reform. Within a week, he announced the Equity Banking Reform Program, a $50 million initiative, smaller than some had expected but targeted and powerful. It included artificial intelligence monitoring of teller behavior, designed to flag unusual delays or repeated denials, a confidential hotline for customers to report bias, and scholarships for students from underserved communities pursuing finance degrees. He explained quietly in a press statement, "This is not about punishment. It is about building a culture where dignity is non-negotiable." The words were quoted in every article, his tone calm but resolute, the style of a leader who did not need to shout to be heard. The reaction was mixed. Some praised him for decisive action. Others criticized the firings as hasty. One editorial claimed he had weaponized his power, but the facts were undeniable. The complaints, the footage, the testimony. And in time, the noise faded, leaving the reforms in place, stronger than the scandal itself. Customers noticed the difference. Lines moved smoother, service grew warmer, accountability felt real, and slowly the bank's reputation began to recover. For Anthony, the victory was not in headlines or applause. It was in walking into his own branch weeks later in another plain shirt, standing in line again, and this time being greeted with respect before anyone knew his name. A small but profound reminder that change had taken root. As for Victoria, Daniel, and Lisa, their downfall served as a warning to others. Whispered in break rooms, discussed in training sessions, their names turned into cautionary tales. "Don't be another Langston. Don't end up like Brooks. Don't pull a Hernandez," employees said quietly. The humiliation of one branch became the lesson of an entire system, and Anthony knew that was exactly the point. The consequence of arrogance was not just personal loss. It was the spark for institutional change. And for every customer who had once been silenced, their voices now echoed through new policies and new leaders who dared to listen. 3 months after that Friday morning, when a man in a plain white shirt walked into the Wall Street branch of Liberty First Bank and turned an ordinary lobby into a courtroom of accountability, the echoes of that moment were still being felt across the company. The branch had not closed. It had transformed. New faces sat behind the counters. Young tellers trained in a revised curriculum that emphasized dignity before dollars, integrity before image. And every day as customers walked through the glass doors, they saw the same marble floors, the same polished counters. But the tone was different. The tension that once hung in the air replaced by respect. And right near the entrance, a framed plaque declared in simple words, "Every customer matters. Every voice counts." Maya Torres, the young teller who had stood between her manager and justice, now wore a badge that read, Integrity Team Lead, a title that might have seemed ceremonial to some, but to her carried the weight of responsibility. She spent her mornings not only overseeing transactions, but also reviewing reports, talking with staff, reminding them that fairness was not optional. It was the foundation of the job. And though she was only 26, she carried herself with the calm authority of someone who had stared fear in the face and chosen principle instead. Customers recognized her now. Some whispered, "That's the one who stood up for him." And though she blushed at the attention, she answered only with a quiet smile, knowing she had done what was right. Anthony Carter, meanwhile, stayed mostly out of the spotlight. He still walked into branches unannounced, sometimes in a polo shirt, sometimes again in that same white t-shirt, a deliberate reminder that appearances should never decide service. And each time he was greeted with respect before his identity was known. He felt the quiet satisfaction of change taking hold, not in press conferences or headlines, but in the daily rhythm of fairness being practiced without hesitation. His $50 million equity banking reform program rolled forward steadily. New AI systems monitoring teller behavior flagged irregularities. Compliance teams followed up, and while a few employees grumbled about oversight, most admitted that the rules had made the job clearer, safer, and more honest. Customers began to file fewer complaints, and the ones that did arrive were investigated quickly rather than buried. Anthony spoke rarely, but when he did, his words carried weight. At a shareholder meeting, he explained, "Integrity is not an expense, it is an investment, because every dollar we protect without bias strengthens the foundation of trust that keeps this institution alive." And even critics who had accused him of being too harsh found little room to argue against results. The downfall of Victoria Langston, Daniel Brooks, and Lisa Hernandez remained fresh in memory, not because their names were shouted on national broadcasts, but because they were whispered in training rooms as warnings. New hires were told, "Remember what happened on Wall Street. Remember that one branch can stain the whole institution if arrogance replaces service." And those words stuck. Managers across the company began holding listening sessions, asking customers about their experiences. And in a quiet but real way, the humiliation of one branch had become the compass for all others. Pointing firmly toward dignity, Victoria herself remained under investigation, her career in banking permanently closed. She had traded her Wall Street office for a small apartment in New Jersey, occasionally seen in court corridors, her name now a symbol of cover-ups and corruption. Daniel drifted from job to job, each one smaller than the last, while whispers of his shove still followed him, and Lisa's name sat on an unspoken blacklist, her applications rejected before she could even interview. All three of them living with the weight of choices made in arrogance and preserved forever in digital record. For Anthony, the lesson was not about revenge. He often reflected on that day in his private office, the sun setting across the Manhattan skyline, and he would replay the moment Daniel shoved him, the moment Maya stepped between them, the moment the crowd formed a barrier, and he would whisper to himself, "It wasn't about me. It was about them. About everyone who has been told they don't belong." His legacy was not firing a handful of staff. It was showing that silence could be broken, that dignity could be defended, that leadership meant standing steady when others tried to strip you of worth. He never gave the viral interview. He never sought a book deal. He simply kept walking into his banks, greeting tellers, nodding to customers, reminding all who saw him that humility was stronger than arrogance and presence was stronger than power. Maya's journey continued as well. She was invited to speak at local colleges about workplace courage. She stood in front of young students and told them, "I didn't stand up because I thought I'd be promoted. I stood up because I couldn't stand by and watch someone be humiliated." Her words moved audiences, and though she was still new in her career, people saw in her the promise of a future leader, Someone who might one day sit at the top not because of title, but because of integrity. Customers who once would have stayed silent began to share their own stories. Small community meetings sprouted where people described how they had been ignored. And with Anthony's support, those stories were turned into data, into policies, into measurable change. The branch at Wall Street remained open, stronger than before, and in its lobby, along with the plaque. Another small but powerful gesture appeared, a wall where customers could leave notes of appreciation or concern. Every note reviewed weekly, none discarded, a living reminder that voices mattered. And each week Maya read them carefully, sending summaries up the chain, making sure the promise was not forgotten. 3 months became 6. 6 months became a year. And still the memory of that morning remained sharp. Not as a wound, but as a turning point. The day one man in a white shirt refused to leave and instead forced an institution to change. And so, as Anthony Carter looked back on it all, he understood that legacy was not measured in billions or headlines, but in small acts of justice that ripple outward. He thought of his grandmother's savings bond, denied decades ago. He thought of the laughter he endured in Detroit, the humiliation that had once burned in silence, and he knew that everything had led to this, to building a place where no child, no young professional, no elder would ever again be told, "You don't belong here." The phrase that had haunted him had been rewritten, and in its place stood a new truth etched into policy, practice, and culture. You do belong. Because dignity is not earned by appearance. It is guaranteed by humanity. And with that, the story of Liberty First Bank's reckoning closed not with noise, but with presence. Not with spectacle, but with quiet transformation. A reminder to everyone listening that true leadership does not roar. It simply refuses to bow. And by standing tall, it lifts everyone else a little higher. Thank you for watching this story. If it moved you, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. Your voice helps keep these stories alive.